Well, thanks everyone for joining today. And this is our 5th episode of 501c3. And you may see some announcements over the next few weeks where we may be building out the community online and maybe even taking it into the real world. And just to give you a little bit of background, the idea behind what we're calling our movement is simple, but we really have a big goal behind it. And that is really to help improve the impact of nonprofits by using data in 2 ways: to make decisions and take action. The difference is that showing data to make it look pretty or just seeing a few KPIs, which is how a lot of folks work today, doesn't really move the needle the way you want to. And what we've thought about is because nonprofits are generally open to sharing their data, and they have been, the community as a whole can really learn much faster rather than if we were to use some type of other data sets or canned data that didn't relate as well to the nonprofit world. So we've got a lot to do. We're going to get started. I'm Lee Feinberg. I started this community over the summer, so we're making some great progress. And I just want to say that as you're listening today, if you think maybe you want to be a co-host in the future or have ideas of someone who may want to be a co-host, please let me know. And joining me today, we have Pam Zerpeli. She's going to be our moderator, and Marie Apple is going to be our co-host today. So Marie, thanks for being with me and spending time to really help move our efforts forward. So just a little bit about Marie. She grew up in upstate New York, which we're going to get a big snowstorm in this area pretty soon, so I bet she's glad she's not here. And she was the first in her family to graduate from college at Harvard University, which is fantastic. And she taught elementary school in Jackson, Mississippi through Teach for America, and then joined the Dallas Independent School District Administration as a data analyst in what's called their Innovative Human Capital Management and Early Childhood Departments. That sounds pretty exciting. One day we're going to have to talk about that a little more. And today she works at the Commit Partnership, which is an education data nonprofit in Dallas, Texas. She is the manager of statewide analytics initiatives. And again, I'm Lee Feinberg, and I've been working with Tableau since 2009. And what I'm going to do today is you're going to get exposed to something that I call my design to act framework. And it's a little bit different from maybe how you're used to thinking about working with your data and analytics. As I mentioned before, we're really going to focus on the idea about making decisions and taking actions. I consider those the stars of our story rather than the data. Data today really just has more of a supporting role. So a few housekeeping things. You'll be able to ask questions. Either you can put them in the chat, but there is a question section there. We'll get to those at the end. You're not going to be able to ask questions out loud during the session. And also this is being recorded. So in about a week or so, I'll have the link up and some other notes about the episode that you can, of course, share with folks. And we'd love it if you could share it with your organizations and other nonprofits that you know about. So let's get started. So just a little bit about how this came around, because I think it's really going to give you some ideas about what this is becoming. This was really the intersection of 3 things that were happening in my life. And one is I actually work with some nonprofits and other foundations. And over the last few years, I've also worked with a group called the Tableau Foundation, which you might be familiar with. So I donate time to go and teach what they call their data fellows. And I've fortunately been able to travel over the US and even to Europe to do that and work with some great teams. And also, I've been running the Tableau user groups in New York and New Jersey area since 2010, and probably ran close to 80-ish user groups. So the 3 of those things were starting to kind of coalesce in my head, and then I came up with this idea to to take those three ideas and focus them on this idea of 501c.cc. And actually, just to let you know, I stopped running those user groups after 8.5 years to really focus my energy on this community. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to be spending about 10 minutes with Marie, and we're just going to have a conversation about her work. Now, the fun part is she doesn't know what I'm going to ask her. We haven't rehearsed this. We haven't really talked about what her data is in any kind of detail. So this is really, really live. And then we're going to take a look at her dashboards and see what her current work looks like. But the key of this conversation before we do that is an idea that hopefully you can remember this idea. It's called intent before content. Until we really understand the message that we're trying to deliver through our data, through our visualizations, we can't really figure out the best way to show that. A lot of times what people do, especially with something like Tableau, because they've made it so easy to work with data, they turn on the software, they connect to their data, they start making charts, and they put some charts together into a dashboard. But what we find is a lot of times those pieces aren't connected necessarily in the easiest way to start building insights. So this idea of intent before content really focuses on what do we want to do? What are we trying to talk about? What's the message? And then we can figure out how to show it. So that's what you're going to experience today. And Pam's going to keep me honest because I really get into this kind of interview process with Marie. And we really just want to hold it at about 10 minutes or so. That way we can have a lot of time to get into working on her dashboard as well. So I am going to fire up my screen here and hope this works correctly. How does it look? Actually, we don't want to show this yet. Sorry, I forgot. I want to just keep it here. All right. So Marie, are you ready?
I am ready and
All right.
excited.
Okay. So first thing I want to do is let's suspend reality because we want to think a little bit outside the box. So imagine that you have all the data you could ever want, and it's perfectly organized in the world's fastest database, right? We don't want any trouble with that. And of course, we're going to use Tableau to connect to the data and build our visuals. So do you have a picture of that in your mind? It's pretty nice, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So now that we have all that in place, let's actually fast forward about 6 months. And your project has been a big success. Not that it isn't already, but it's maybe even a bigger success. And it's so great. You get a call from the Wall Street Journal. They want to interview you about this. So congratulations. Now.
Thank you. Thank you. I know I deserve it.
Of course you do. Just for being here, you deserve it. So let's go through a few of the questions that they're going to ask you. So tell me a little bit about, what was happening at the company when you decided to do this project? Why were you getting this data together? Why were you building these dashboards and stories?
Yeah, I think, I'll go along with the scenario, but I think it's actually very real for us because I'm located in Texas, and Texas is very much a data-rich environment because the ways that our laws are set up and whatnot, we have almost all the data that we could want on our students, but we call it a data-rich, information-poor state because people can't get insights out of data that they can't get access to. And so something that is both a job of the Commit partnership, but really, has kind of solely landed on my shoulders is getting that data clean and getting it out to people. And so in this lovely scenario, I'm so excited that I've been able to achieve that. And so I think the idea is, people make decisions with the information that they have at hand. And so those decisions are going to get made whether or not they have this additional information or not. And so to be able to give lawmakers and parents, and everyone in between all of the information on schools when deciding how to fund them or where to send their kids. That is exactly where we want to get. And so everything that we're doing is kind of driving towards getting that information out there and making it more accessible to the general public, up to government officials that are making the decisions about how our public schools run. So I don't know if that quite answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting that you have it set up that way to be able to get the information, and then the question is, now how do you do that?
Mm-hmm. And what does it mean?
Exactly. So yeah, that's a good background. Now, so let's take that a step further. So when you were starting this, and now again it's 6 months in the future, what is it that you would actually define as success? How would you know? What would you consider when the project is successful? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think that one of the main ways I would see it, I think one of the first places we would see it is the conversation. And so, both verbally and on Facebook and Twitter, hearing people talk differently about the data and actually understanding it. So, for example, we are finally at a place in the current real day scenario where, we have people around Dallas and in some other parts of Texas saying, only 30% of our students are reading on grade level by third grade. And that's true. And we've worked for 6 years to get that out into the public, to really understand that our public schools are not doing what they need to do for our kids, and we need to invest in them more to be able to do that. But in this lovely scenario where we've achieved all this, people are not just talking about, okay, 30% third grade reading, but now when we break that out by race, what is the achievement gap between minority students and white students? What is the achievement gap between economically disadvantaged students and those peers that are not? And really understanding not just the nuances within the data, but what that means. And really, I think I can get data nerds like myself to hook onto this, but it's that next level of really understanding, well, why are there these achievement gaps between, or opportunity gaps really, especially between students of different races, and really start connecting that to the history that allowed these things to happen. And so it's weird because I want people to dig further into this nerdy data that's so far away from the students in order to connect it back to the students' daily lives.
So who's the audience for something like that? So you said that data point is known, but how are you really going to get people to, regular people out there, everyday people, like you mentioned? It could be parents, even teachers and administrators. They're not necessarily analyst types, right?
Yeah.
So how are you thinking that message is going to come across?
Yeah, so as we've gotten more sophisticated, we've been able to, especially because Tableau, and we use Alteryx a lot, allows you to, let's say I make one graph that is, I duplicate all my sheets before I start changing them, right? And so maybe I make one version that is for legislators, and then I make a totally different version for parents that is also available in Spanish. And then I make a different version that is for principals, right? And so it's about really differentiating the level of data and the type of data for your ideal audience. And, if we have 7 different ideal audiences, then we should probably have 7 different tools that actually target what they need.
That's great, actually, that you're going through that level of work. It's not that common, because you're right. You have different audiences, and even though it might be the same data, how they would use that or what they want to get out of it could be quite different. And so if you were to create just one dashboard or one set of dashboards and say, here everybody use that, but they really have different intent, right? Their intent is different, as we talked about, then it might be much harder for them to do that. So maybe we'll take a look at that, and we'll focus on kind of one thing. But how is it that you're going to help them through that process of, what do we do now, right? So let's just say you're able to show them one of these gaps, and we could talk about what a gap means. What is it that they're supposed to do? I'm a parent. You show this to me. Now what?
Yeah. Yeah. So let me give you a live example from yesterday, actually. I went and presented some of this data to one of our partners. And without going into too much details, City Year is one of our partners where essentially there are, fresh out of college age-ish students that are going into schools around the country and being kind of like a extra set of hands and brain for the teachers in the classroom. And so, again, I can go into way more detail at a different time. I'm not doing the program justice, but each time they get a new cohort, they ask me to come in and just kind of give them the state of Dallas and state of education here in the state of Texas. And we walk through that and we see those gaps, and some of their very astute, core members were like, well, Marie, what do we do with this? You're showing me this depressing data. What do we do with this? And so we talk through ways that, when we see that, for example, Black boys are being suspended about twice. They're about 14% of the population in Dallas County schools, but they are 28% of out-of-school suspensions. Therefore, they're being overrepresented in the suspension rate. And so maybe that means that when you see students that are being suspended, can you help out and maybe help with that discipline problem in another way that doesn't kick a kid out of school and keep them from that instructional learning environment, because this background and that this is the reality that we're living in. And so how do you augment the reality in real time to help fix these end results? And so, a lot of the conversation was around, every day you're not going to know what that looks like, but trying to figure out what it looks like in the moment, I guess, depending on your role.
Interesting. Yeah, so it does. So it wasn't necessarily that you had the answer, but there's something indicating there that involves a conversation, and I imagine all of those things could be different along the way depending on what you see. There's not necessarily one type of intervention for what you see. You have to really take into account what's going on.
Yeah, and it depends on your role. Your role may be different. Your intervention may be different given on the role that you have in the education system.
But now if we were to reverse that, where instead of trying to use the data to try to find something like that, what I want to talk, and maybe we'll do this when we go in, is look at it more from the perspective of trying to solve for particular situations. So even more so than just presenting the data, and we'll go in and look, and maybe you've done some of this already, rather than just trying to show the data to their different audiences in different ways, we're actually trying to target very specific activities, right? So if you know that suspension is a problem, how do we fix suspension? I know I'm probably oversimplifying it, but how do we reduce suspensions? You know that there are certain problems already. So what you want to do is look at it from the problem area rather than look for something, say there's data, oh, look, there's a problem with it. Now talk about it, where you want to identify more a better understanding of the problem itself from the beginning, because you probably know some of these things are there. Something like that too is a lot of what we end up doing with this kind of an approach.
Yeah, I mean, the way that Commit got its start with data is that we started out with bright spots rather than talking about places where, oh, this, suspension is a huge problem at this school. Because whenever using data, you kind of, especially it's publicly available data, but it's data that people were not looking at before we existed. And so we really had to build trust with using that data and show that we weren't using it to say, aha, got you, you're not doing well. Let's instead flip it and highlight the places that are, and then try to spread those best practices.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And trust is a big thing with any organization, right? Where especially if you're seeing data for the first time, because people may have assumptions about what was correct, and if you're really seeing the finally correct version of it, then it makes a big difference. So that's really interesting to hear that you took that approach. Some really good ideas that you were able to do it that way. So let's go in and start taking a look at what you've got using that background and see what you have and start looking at maybe some ways we can, some alternate ways that we can rethink what you've already got. And by the way, everybody knows, Maria is very brave because, she's putting herself on the block here for all kinds of open conversation, right? And as a side note, I hope that none of it comes across as sounding, too strong or not, but right, the goal here is to try to really help people understand where to be able to make improvements. So we're just trying to be candid more than anything else.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get.
And while you're pulling that up, I will just mention that I actually was one of Lee's. I got the pleasure of, as a Tableau data fellow, got to hear Lee's presentation when I was very new to Tableau, probably a few months in. And I built this dashboard probably only after using Tableau for about 6 months. And so I haven't refreshed this dashboard in about a year. And so I am in no way offended if there's changes to make, because it's time to both refresh this dashboard in terms of the data behind it, but also I've grown a lot in terms of my Tableau skill, and I'm excited to push that and try to make this visualization better. So I'm excited for the critique.
Great. So I hope everybody is seeing the dashboard.
I think we're seeing the purple screen right now.
Yeah, we're not seeing it.
Okay, hold on. This was our one tricky area. And share my screen. Screen one. Entire screen. Share. Oh, wait, here we go. I just got to do that.
Oh, yeah, the million screen thing.
Yeah, now it should be good.
Yeah, you're good now.
Beautiful. Okay.
And Pam, your voice sounds better too.
Great.
Wow. We're all now
it's a lot of things. There you go.
We're doing great. Okay. And Pam, just if you can, just keep an eye on any questions that might be rolling in too. Just if you think there's something we should address while we're going through it, feel free to jump in and we can do that as well. All right. So walk us through quickly what we're looking at here, and then we'll go in and start seeing how we may make some adjustments.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, the general data you are seeing behind this is the Texas STAR tests. It's an acronym that I forget what it stands for, but all you need to know is it's essentially student achievement tests. So what you're looking at right now is third grade reading. I would love to go into a rant about why third grade reading proficiency is so important, but I will save you guys that for right now. But feel free to email me afterwards if you want to talk about it more. But so you're looking at third grade reading scores. To be clear, this is not the percent that the district is, the number of students that are by a certain race. It is how that demographic is doing on third grade reading. So all the way to the left, you're seeing the state of Texas. Those 3 bars are how white students are doing on third grade reading, how Hispanic students are doing, and how Black students are doing. Out of 100%, what percent of that district or that geography is reading on grade level in third grade. And so the way you'd interpret that is 58% of white students in the state of Texas are reading on grade level, 37% of Hispanic, 30% of Black students are reading on grade level in the state of Texas. And then as you move to the right, it breaks it out into some of our biggest districts. So the far left is just the state average. And then you'll see where we are at Dallas ISD, 63% of white students are reading on grade level in third grade, I think 38 and 21, respectively, for Hispanic and Black. And so that's kind of what you're seeing on the graph, but the general trend you should be seeing within each group, whether it's the whole state of Texas or some of our major districts, is that unfortunately, kind of similar to what we were talking about earlier, if we just looked at third grade reading overall, you would see one average. But when you break it out, that's somewhere in the middle of these, when you break it out by race, you see our white students are really pulling that average up, And unfortunately, our Hispanic and Black students are kind of getting left behind. And so that's what we refer to in the education community as the achievement gap, or really the opportunity gap, because we're not funding the schools where our Black and Brown students go well enough to get them up to accessing that same level of education that our white students are. And so again, we try to focus on the positives though here. If you look at El Paso, they don't have quite as big of a disparity between the different races. And that's one of the districts that we've really been learning from about how to start to close the achievement gap. But does that kind of give you an idea of what you're looking at in general?
Yep. And I'm curious here. So the gap means gap from white, I guess.
Yes, correct. So the gap
really
from white for white is zero.
Really really just the difference between 58 and 37. And I know you have a little note about rounding. Okay.
Yeah.
So now this clearly, this was something that someone was able to select all of these values versus what you said in the beginning, which is, I know we have a really big problem with third grade reading, right? So this is really, I can choose all kinds of data rather than saying this is a story about third grade reading.
So yeah, that's a good point. Is that third grade reading matters most to us, but if you were to switch the filter to be all grades and all subjects, this same pattern will hold.
Right. So I'm wondering if is this a kind of a known thing, or was this discovered? Let me kind of say that.
Yeah, this is very much a known thing, in that we know if you are in the education community, you in K through 12 mostly, you know that this is happening, but you might not know how bad it is.
Okay, so that's the reason I'm asking that, is maybe this page so let's actually go in here. Let's go into, actually have to get to the dashboard, and I'm just going to make a copy of this. By the way, in case folks don't know this, if you go to a dashboard and you hit copy and then you hit paste, it actually will copy not just the dashboard, but all the worksheets underneath it. That's a way that,
I didn't know that.
There you go. Yeah, that, sorry about that. Yeah, that's a way that you can do this kind of quickly, where you don't have to try, just mess with the dashboard. You can get everything fixed. So and by the way, these are just ideas, right? So you'll take these and use them however you see fit. So my thinking is that if you really want to, because what you want to do is get people focused, and you don't want them even fiddling with these. Maybe picking the counties, maybe that's something they want, or districts or something. But if you want to tell a story about third grade reading, that's what you shouldn't even have filters for that. That's how I'm thinking about it. And we would even try to change the title to something else. And I'm going to come back. We'll think through what that is, right? Because I want to focus this on, something like, maybe we can even just call it, you call them opportunity, right?
Yeah, opportunity gaps.
Opportunity, I'll just call it opportunities to improve, I don't know, third grade reading. I don't know, something like that. I'm just making it up, right? And so we really focus on kind of what we're trying to see. We can even make that more specific, but to me, that's a starting point about how you want, because here, the way I think about it is, think about it as a story, right? And you kind of have it set up that way. I want someone to look at the title of this page, assuming they read the title, and immediately it's like, I want it to be a line right into their brain, right? So they see that and they're like, oh, that's what this is. It's not about district, achievement gaps, blah, blah, blah. It's like, nope, we're talking about third grade reading problems, or gaps, or however you want to, get that right phrasing across. So to me, that's one thing. Now let's look at here. I don't know that we need this extra piece up here. Maybe that was just an artifact of something where it's just kind of repetitive. Is there a reason to have where it says, it looks like it's a little different, where this is Houston and Harris.
Yeah, it's the county versus the ISD that you're representing.
Got it. Okay. So let's
But there's a lot of things, to your point, Lee, like, you know, how we said that, you know, we're trying to customize things more. This was from an era where we were doing more of a kitchen sink dashboard model where it is everything. And so, you know, this was just in case somebody might not know what county Austin ISD was in. Well, if they don't know what county Austin ISD is in, that's a different problem than third grade reading. And so I'm seeing that now that just needs to go.
Yeah, and you could even sometimes, if you need that extra information, you can do that with tooltips, right? If someone was to hover over it, or you know, something, you can add that information in other ways. Because I see you're using tooltips, right? You could even put that in here if you had to. So now let's really talk about the focus here. So and just for the sake of it, I'm gonna delete that. And I'm going to delete this one so that it can't be changed, just for the sake of the discussion. And one thing you said to me was, we want to look at the opportunity gaps. Okay. And I would consider reversing what you have here, meaning this is the gap. This is what people really want to see. This is secondary to that, in my opinion. That's why I'm throwing that out as an idea.
You're right.
Right. Does that make sense?
You're absolutely right. I wasn't sure how to best visualize that, but that's 100% correct.
Okay. And that goes back to the thinking of that idea of intent, right? And so when you stop thinking about the data and you think about, what do I want people to zone in on, right? What do I really want to emphasize? That starts to help you, right? Because both of these are important. But this is the thing you really want them to see, because out of here, right, if I scan across, I can see this is the 51 and this is 46, right? But I might not get, it's harder to know that, you know, I don't want to scan across, right? I just want to kind of get hit with it. So let's go into that one. I'm guessing that's this. And we could make these bars. Oh, you have it. Oh, I see. Looks like we'll need to do something.
Yeah, it's a table calc, and this is still when I was not very good at table calc, so we'll see how it goes.
No, that's just the way you place them, right? No, I think it's good the way you have it, right? So here, and also it gets it. You don't have to look at that 0, right? Because we know that that's there. So now, if we were to go back here, we're going to start to see that transform, and maybe we'd.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Maybe we would take this and move it. We'd have to change the titles, but maybe that goes up there. Next, we could just go in here and we could steal that whole thing, probably, and go onto the worksheet. The title is just kind of buried in there a little bit. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, one thing that I had trouble with is having the fields that change embedded in the title, because and I'm sure people can relate to this, that this all happened. I came in to put us onto Tableau, but we were used to, and especially my CEO is used to PowerPoint. And so there's a lot of things that they're trying to do to make it kind of more like PowerPoint. And so does that make sense? So like when they change the subject, they want the subject to change in the title, because those would have been 2 different slides in the PowerPoint realm. And so those are just some of the struggles that we deal with. He really likes Tableau now, though. We're just trying to, you know, get everything switched over.
Yeah, that's always another thing, right? Is you have to deal with the PowerPoint issue, right?
Yeah.
So I would actually maybe even think about making this one more like you had. Let's see,
like text.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, we got to do some cleanup on these things, but something like that. So that's just a start, right?
Yeah.
In terms of, and then I'm a big fan of just keeping the labels going across, rather than I have trouble tilting my head to read.
Yep, agreed.
So Uh, Now, let me ask you a question. So, first question, was there a particular reason why you chose to use 3 different colors here?
Partially because in slides and in our scorecard and all of our literature that we put out, we've always used those 3 colors for race. And then we try to kind of hold that constant, because when you go to the next one, the next kind of logical piece in this story is this over time. And so you're going to have different colors for the line graph. And so we're kind of trying to train the user to know that like yellow is white, blue is black, and red is Hispanic.
Okay, got it. All right, fair enough. We'll come to that. Maybe we'll go on to the next piece and we'll see that maybe there's some different ways to handle that. The reason I say that is, one is sometimes you get overloaded with color.
Yeah.
Number 2, when you want to use color because here you're just using it. You're using it in a way that makes sense to distinguish between those. But when you really want to use color to emphasize something, and you've already used a lot of color, it's harder to do that, right? Because it kind of just all starts to blend in. The third thing that I'm seeing in some areas, but it's going to vary, is people are trying to, in some ways, get away from using colors or shapes or anything to talk about race and gender, especially, right? So people are moving away from blue and pink, or the little man and the little woman, or colors for that. So there's kind of more awareness and thinking about doing that. Especially I've seen that in schools areas too, like the schools themselves when they're looking at data in some cases. So was thinking about why that is. But if it's a standard and people are used to it, I wouldn't necessarily disrupt it now. But you also may not need it, right? So here, it might not be necessary to have it. It just might be, right? But we'll see. So this is a start. We could play around with this more, but I would kind of reverse the way we have it here. So this really starts to jump out, right? These negatives and things like that. Now, if there was an average, right? Because we're just looking at the 3. I know there's more races that you had on this list, right? If we were, maybe there you could put an average in here. I don't know if that would make sense of some sort, or what the average difference is. There might be some other things, because although it's negative, right? Is there some point where, like, is 20%, what's bad? I imagine anything that's a difference is bad, but how bad is bad, right? So let's say here we've got 19%, so it's below 20. Or here, even 16. Here's the lowest one, 16. So I know I care, but I'm what point on this page would I want to look at and go, oh, geez, this is so serious. We really need to deal with this, right? So here, what I'm emphasizing is, look, there's a 16% here. I might say, not so bad. But even this 51, maybe there's something that says that 51% isn't as bad as this 42%. I don't know. I'm only throwing this out as a point of discussion, because people would see this, and if, let's just say that was the case, let's say for some reason this 51% wasn't as important because the volume of students in this area is not as high. Like, there's 10 times more students here. So even though it's 42%, the overall effect is much on a larger student population. So how do you get, right? What would be a gauge in here for thinking about that at an overarching perspective, right? Again, it's thinking about, how do I get to people's attention on the right spot versus their eyes are going to wander to this, right? So we went from this one, which was good. Now we have this, and now it's like, okay, what else do we need to think about? So again, just maybe for your consideration.
Yeah, I think what I'm getting from you, and even just trying to explain it, the idea that we have the state of Texas on there, and then we change kind of level of granularity and have the districts. The state of Texas was there as a comparison point to say the average gap between Black and white students is 27%. But then in this case, it would make more sense for that to be a line across then, so that you could see, like, yes, El Paso still has a gap, but it's not as bad as the states.
Great. Okay.
So I think making those align, and then I think from what you're saying too, I'm trying to tell too many stories here at once, because I'm both looking at the Hispanic gap and the Black gap. and maybe having one slide, one dashboard for Hispanic and one dashboard for Black would be a more clear storyline.
Well, yeah. So the other way to do that, if it's not important to compare, to know that Hispanic is -35 and Black is -46, right? The one simple way to do that would be something like maybe like this. Oops, that didn't work out like I wanted. Maybe that's because of how the calculation's done, or even. Oh, what has happened? That's not what I expected to happen there. Oh yeah, it's probably because of the way the calculation's set up. But what I would do is break it up so that you had them ordered differently or had them on different rows, right? And that way,
yeah,
you know what I'm
I
saying?
see what you're saying. Yeah.
So let's edit. See if we can do this quickly. What we want to do
You
is
mean like putting demographic onto rows so that you see Black as one graph and Hispanic as another?
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So I just
then you still
changed.
get the trend of both of them, but you're not trying to compare them to each other as much. I like that a lot.
Exactly, right. And then the little thing you can do here is you can hide this one.
Oh.
Right. We should be able to, maybe not. Nope. Maybe because it's a table calc.
Right. I struggle with that is like, I can't get rid of white because that's what I'm calculating off of, but that might just be about restructuring my data if that's the purpose of
I have
this
to go
dashboard.
and take a look at why.
This data is structured very strangely, so.
Okay. All right. I'd have
I would not try to understand it on a live call.
that could be. All right. So, but yeah, that's definitely one thing that, let's see how you have this set up. Quick calculation difference. Yeah, maybe we could play, you and I could play around with that. But yeah, something like this, I think, goes to what you were saying, right? Where you split it up differently. Or you could, even if you had it here where, let's see if we had it, within the district. Oh, why didn't that go like I thought? One more level, right? Like that.
Oh, sure.
Too. Either way. And then you could have that line going across. So you could use a reference line, and then you would get a much clearer view of what was going on. I think that might, I think either of those, I think I like this better potentially. I think it'll be because you won't have the duplication of otherwise you'll have so many duplications of the geographies.
Right.
So, and plus I think with this, you could actually have more geographies. You'd obviously, if you wanted, there's a lot of space here. The other thing I was thinking about on this, it looks like you can switch between race. You can go to language.
Yep.
And some others.
Economic disadvantage is the one we use next most.
Okay. And what would those labels be?
I'm not clear why those labels disappeared, but in this group, you only have 2 that you're comparing. So you're, instead of comparing 2 different races to one other race, you're comparing economically disadvantaged students to non-economically disadvantaged students. So you're only going to have 1 set of bars. Okay.
Now, when you do that, does it matter if you, oops, clicked on the wrong one here. Does it matter if would you ever want to compare economic disadvantage with race? Would you ever want to know those at the same time?
No, because the way that the data is aggregated from the state, those would have overlap.
Okay. So there's no reason to try to do anything that says, oh, Black and economic disadvantage. They're just kind of completely different topics.
Yep, completely. Okay. They're, yeah.
Okay. So let's just see if maybe there's one more. You talked about, maybe it's this one, I'm guessing, over time.
Yep.
Okay. So let's go here again quickly, because we'll finish this one up quick and then see if maybe we get to some Q&A. Oh, the other thing is you got a lot of colors going on down here, which makes it sometimes difficult to see exactly which one you're operating on. But guess.
Oh, yeah. That's, again, not exactly part of my best Tableau knowledge phase.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes good to do it. But if someone else was to come in and start using this, it might be a little bit more.
Oh, it'd be very confusing.
All right. So let's talk. So walk me through this one quickly too. So let's assume that's still kind of the third grade story going on here.
Yep. Essentially, this is for when people are looking at the graph that you were just on, and then they ask, well, how has that changed over time? So exact same kind of story. So like if you were to, like right now it defaults to the state of Texas, which I have seen some confusion as people were just looking at, 5 different areas, and now it's on state of Texas. And so I think that's one point of, kind of a logical break.
Yep.
But then the other piece is like, so El Paso, we said, was doing well. Well, how are they doing over time? And you can see their gap kind of closing, whereas other places have not. When I say the gap, I mean literally the space between the red and yellow and the blue and yellow.
In here. Okay.
Yeah. And so I think now, knowing what I know, like we may want to shade the space between those, because that's like really what I'm trying to draw attention to is the white space between those lines.
So you could almost do the same kind of thing we just did before. It looks like
that's true.
These are just the numbers again that represent here.
Yeah,
right?
They're not the gap.
Yeah, that might. I might just get rid of these.
Yep.
I think it doesn't really add anything, and people then will start wondering maybe what they are. So there's a couple things you could do here. I like showing the trend because the trend is different than just the gap. But you might show the trend and the gap together, right? Because again, when you show a gap, you don't know what it's math, right? It's A minus B, and you don't know what A and B are. And you use different. You can get the same gap with different A's and B's. So you still need to see the trends. I think would be helpful. And now I see here why you're saying you kind of have the 3 lines. It might make sense to show them differently. Now, especially since you're trying to close the gap, I think it can help to show them together. The only thing that you could potentially do, like let's say you didn't want to show them together and you wanted to show them separately, then you wouldn't need all the colors, right? If you split them up. So this is under demographic, right? So if you had something like that, but then you're not seeing the gap, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could tell that this is much higher, but you can't tell that this is, well, you can. I mean, you can see it's above it, right? But it just kind of depends what story you want to tell. I mean, if you did it this way, right? I don't see value in that as much.
No, I don't either.
But again, it goes back to what's the point you're trying to make? Don't think about how do I show the data. Think about what I want them to see, so that if they read across and right, you'd probably want to change the title here. I mean, you did a little bit with the date, but again, try to write the headline in a way that helps them think about not what the data is, but what message they should get from the data, right? So if it's, and it might not be a conclusion, right? It might just say something like, is the gap closing between the 3 demographics? That might be the question you're trying to answer here, right? And then you look at it and you go, well, no, it's not, right?
Yeah.
Depending if you change the view here, right? So if you were to change it where it's more like the difference, something like that, right? I don't know if that's the right math, but right?
Sure, but yeah.
Something like that, then you would see, wait, the gap is still kind of huge here, but then what happened between here and here, where it actually got better, which looks like it could be the case where it went up quite a bit. Right? It went up from 54 to 58, and then it went back down to 54. So it kind of, something happened in here, but you would see it better if you just did that same kind of thing, looking at the differences. So just think about it does that make sense? Kind of hitting it from that different perspective of the message versus the data. I know it's a big switch, but
no, but I think that makes sense. And I think I was struggling with, like, I liked the idea of you saying, like, is the gap closing? Because, in one district, the gap might be closing, and then another graph, it might be opening. And so I was struggling with a title that makes sense there. And so we literally are just using the titles from the same slide that I'm duplicating
Right.
in this process. But I think it's, now we've moved forward, we can advance a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, and again, too, I think it will help people who either aren't familiar with the data and don't want to look at it that hard, which could be all groups, right? Are the challenge that folks like us face is that we work with the data so much. It's sometimes more difficult to put ourselves in the position of someone who is looking at this for the first time.
Yeah, fresh
And
eyes.
it's like, wow, what is all? There's a lot of numbers and colors, and there's lines and all these, right? Instead of one thing across the top, here's what's going on. And now the other thing too is, if you were to do something like, let's just go back to this one. And again, not that the math is correct here, but I think it is. Here it is a difference of 4. It went down 4%, 4 percentage points from that one. So you can see that big jump. The math is correct here, right? You might want to somehow highlight this, or like this would really jump out to people, right? That's something that the gap widened. Like here, you could really see it's very close. It's almost touching. Well, this is the difference. This isn't the difference between them all. This is just the difference year to year. But whatever you showed here, if the title matched it, then it would jump out as more important to what they needed to see. The question too becomes how far back in this kind of thing. How far back do you want to go? How far is it relevant? Where you can see what the gap is looking like, and so on. And also, you might put the tooltips might have, maybe there's events, right, that happened that you know about that you could add in on these in some way. Oh yeah, because people would be like, wait, why did it bump up where it looks pretty good here? And we had
because the state cut funding in 2011. Yeah.
Right. So this would be really good if you could add that in as a note that people could hover over it and they go and see that, right? They go, oh yeah, I remember that. Or people might not have known that. You know that because you have the history. But it's only if you've been doing this for a long time that you might know that specifically, right? And then it might be here, yeah, we got our money back, or whatever it is. So.
And how would you do that? How do you add the note?
Well, there's a couple different ways. One technique I like to do is create a separate little Excel file. I call it a helper file. And in that file, it would just say, white, I think it's the state of Texas.
On that row, okay.
20, whatever year this is, 2015 or whatever. And then you basically be you'd use like a join or a data blend and bring that little piece of information in. And that way it's all in a separate file that you can just go and edit and add information to at any time really easily.
I love that. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's a nice little
I was going to say, to add to that, if it's somebody who is another group that actually maintains that, historical information, you can use it as a Google sheet. And so they can go in and just update it, and then it will automatically update in your dashboard.
Wow. Okay. That's great.
Perfect. So I see we only have a couple minutes left. I don't know if there's any questions out there that we need to try to address, or we maybe start closing out.
Yeah, there were no questions related to that. Anything.
Okay, great. So maybe Maria could just take this time to see if you have any other thoughts or anything you want to try to hit on really fast before we finish up.
I mean, I guess the only piece is now, so having, like I said, we did these as replications of a PowerPoint slide that we were used to using, and then trying to sell people on these. Now that, I see the value in what you've just done, how do I go sell that back to the CEO that says, no, we've always shown it this way?
Well, I think if you have to show it to them in the new way first, right? You can't talk through it. I think you need to actually work through some of these ideas and what we started on and building it out more, and then show them, hey, if our goal is, if your goal is just to replicate the PowerPoints, we'll keep it this way. If your goal is to help start helping educate people on really seeing what the issues are the way we intend, rather than them looking at slides. We should go this way. Now, it might be, and this is going to sound terrible, our administrators need the PowerPoint deck, right? We can still do that. But for other people who are not, they're not data experts, they're not familiar with these problems, where we're trying to open it up to the public and educate them, we need to take this different approach. So in the same way you replicated them for different audiences, you may take completely different approaches for those audiences too.
Yeah.
So I think you've had the right mindset, but I think you were basing it off this idea of replicating PowerPoint. Now you have to take it that one step further.
Yeah.
I
think that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd like to add something to that too. I think in some respect, you're trying to show some insights, but you could take it a next step. And if you were to look across like the districts, you could build some charts that actually told you the story of the ones that were high, the difference was high or was low. Instead of that, you had to use filters to actually like find out which ones had greater gaps. So you could add, a more detailed story so that your CTO could learn something about the areas that really need focusing, instead of them having to like hunt and peck.
Yeah, exactly.
I see what you mean. That's a great point, Pam. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Well, we're at 3 o'clock, so I think we should close up for folks. Marie, thanks so much for again sharing what the work you've done and being open to thinking about this in some new ways. And also, I would encourage folks who are on, if you think that there's something you could contribute afterwards. I'm sure Marie would love to hear your thoughts. If you faced kind of similar issues on your side, that would be great. And even extending the conversation into the blog post once it's up there, maybe there's some conversations to happen over there. So that's it. Thanks again. Keep your eyes open. Hopefully we'll have a February session set up in the next couple of weeks.